Just watch me break it. You'll see. You're falling in the meantime.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that's maybe a little bit uncomfortable for some folks.
Yeah.
Voyeurism.
It is a fascinating one.
It is fascinating. And, you sent us this article, The Gaze Unseen, and I have to say, it really got me thinking.
Yeah, it's a good one.
We're going to kind of explore what is it that drives people to watch other people without them knowing?
Right.
And where's that line between just kind of observing the world around us and being a little creepy?
It's a good area to explore because I think this article is really going beyond just the act itself, but thinking about, the psychology of it.
Yeah.
What draws us to other people's lives, even when it maybe crosses the line ethically.
And what's interesting, too, is that they use this example of somebody adjusting their nylons in a private moment, which kind of threw me back to some of those vintage advertisements, but it definitely kind of set the stage for this exploration of voyeurism.
A good visual, right? You get that image in your head,
Yeah.
and then you start to think about it a little deeper.
Yeah, so let's unpack this, and we'll start with something I think we can all relate to on some level. Curiosity. Okay? You've been people watching.
Absolutely.
Come on, admit it.
Of course.
It's like reality TV in real life.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's kind of that human curiosity.
Right.
Wanting to understand social patterns and wanting to decode other people's behavior.
Okay.
I mean, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
That's what our brains are wired to do, to observe, to learn from others,
Right.
and to make sense of the world.
It's how we learn.
But as this article points out, that can get a little ethically murky.
Well, so how do you distinguish between healthy curiosity and I don't know, maybe the creepy curiosity?
Yeah.
Where's the line?
I think that's where it gets interesting. And it's not so much what you're looking at, but why are you looking?
Okay.
So, if it's to learn, if it's to understand, if it's to appreciate the variety of human experiences,
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay.
But when it becomes about control and domination or objectification,
Yeah.
that's where we kind of cross into that voyeurism.
Yeah, so the intention behind it.
Exactly.
And it almost seems like it can be a disguise.
Yeah.
That voyeurism can sometimes be a disguise for these other deeper, maybe even subconscious desires.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not like we want to suppress our natural curiosity.
Right.
But be aware
Awareness is key.
of the motivations.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of motivations, though, the article does talk about this idea that voyeurism can be linked to a need for control, and even suggests that some people who, engage in this behavior might be looking for a sense of power
Right.
or mastery over something, particularly if they're feeling insecure or powerless in other areas of their lives.
It makes sense if you think about it. I mean, people who have, struggled with insecurity or who haven't felt agency in their own lives, they might turn to this to create an illusion of control.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to exert power over something that they feel helpless about, even if it's at the expense of somebody else's privacy.
It's almost like a way to compensate for those feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah, so rather than dealing with those feelings directly, they're trying to kind of gain control by intruding into somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little messed up.
It is.
I mean, I organize my sock drawer
It's healthier.
to feel in control, but that's not quite the same thing, is it?
No, it's definitely a healthier coping mechanism.
But you bring up a really good point, though, that this might be a symptom of these bigger, deeper psychological needs that aren't being met in healthy ways.
Absolutely, it's a red flag.
Yeah, okay, so we're already getting kind of deep here.
Okay.
But let's add another layer to this whole forbidden fruit factor.
Okay.
And the article does mention this, too, and particularly when it comes to your, things that are a little risque.
Yeah.
I mean, they use that example of adjusting nylons, as as an example of how the forbidden can be a source of arousal for some people.
Well, you've got the allure of the forbidden.
Right.
Right. And it's breaking social norms, which can be very exciting for people.
Right.
And then you combine that with that kind of perceived safety and anonymity.
Of doing it secretly.
Of doing it secretly.
Yeah.
It's like this little cocktail of excitement.
And you can't deny that there is a certain thrill that comes from the risk of getting caught.
Absolutely.
Like the fact that you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing
Right.
almost heightens the arousal for some people.
It's that complex psychological dynamic
Yeah.
the article's trying to unpack.
Yeah.
We're not saying that it's okay. We're just trying to understand it.
We're trying to understand it.
And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, and to remember that these are real people
Yes.
who have feelings
Absolutely.
and a right to their privacy.
It's about respecting people's boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've talked about curiosity, we've talked about control,
Yeah.
we've talked about forbidden fruit, but there's this other aspect of the article that I find really fascinating.
Okay.
And that is this idea that voyeurism can almost be like a twisted attempt at connection,
Right.
especially for people who are struggling with social isolation.
It's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
To think about, someone who is just feeling so isolated, so disconnected,
Yeah.
that this is their way of feeling a semblance of intimacy,
Right.
feeling part of something, even if it's, unhealthy.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
It is.
I mean, I'll tell you, I used to love going to cafes and watching people and making up stories about their lives, in my head. And it did make me feel less alone in a way.
Sure.
But then, I think as I kind of grew, I realized that actually getting out there and talking to people was probably a much healthier way
Right.
to deal with that loneliness.
You highlight the difference,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all about mutuality and respect and consent.
And consent.
And voyeurism is one-sided.
Uh-huh.
So it's a good reminder that we need to connect.
We need human interaction.
We need it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're starting to see how, this can be a symptom of some deeper things going on.
Okay.
But let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the ethical side of all of this, because obviously
Why
there's
so?
a big ethical component here.
Absolutely.
And the article doesn't shy away from that
No.
at all. They basically lay it out that voyeurism is a violation of privacy, plain and simple.
It is. And everybody has a right to privacy,
Yes, they do.
a right to control access to their experiences, their bodies, their information.
Right.
It's just inherent.
And the potential for harm is huge.
It is.
I mean, the article talks about the shame,
Yeah.
the vulnerability.
The feeling of being violated,
Yeah.
leading to anxiety and depression.
PTSD even.
Absolutely PTSD.
It's not just a harmless prank.
No, it's not.
Hmm.
And the impact can be devastating.
Yeah, imagine discovering that somebody's been watching you
Yeah.
in those private moments without your consent.
It's a feeling of exposure,
Oh, yeah.
betrayal, like you've been dehumanized.
It's like a breach of trust, even if you don't even know the person who's watching you.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes you wonder if we're so quick to, condemn the act of voyeurism itself.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we also be questioning some of the societal norms and attitudes
Absolutely.
that allow it to happen in the first place?
They're a really good point.
Yeah.
Because we need to create a culture that values consent, that values empathy, that values respect.
Yeah.
It's not just about catching the individuals who are doing it.
Right.
It's about saying, hey, this is not okay.
Right. So we're starting to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Voyeurism isn't just about, peeking through windows or something like that. It's this complex issue
It is.
with these deeper psychological and ethical
Absolutely.
implications.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've laid some good groundwork here. We've kind of explored some of the key motivations
Yeah.
behind the psychological needs that it might be trying to fulfill and the ethical considerations that make it so problematic.
I think we've started to really untangle some of the threads
Yeah.
of curiosity,
Yeah.
of control, of forbidden.
Yeah. Okay, so before we move on, I want to kind of pose a question to you listening.
Okay.
Think about a time when maybe you've engaged in people watching,
Yeah.
even if it was in a way that you considered harmless.
Right.
What was your motivation?
Good question.
Were you looking for connection? Were you just looking for entertainment?
Right.
Or something else entirely? Just hold on to that thought and we'll continue our deep dive.
Just watch me break it. You'll see. You're falling into me, touch me.
So welcome back to our deep dive into voyeurism.
Yeah.
Before we went down that rabbit hole of the psychology of it all, we were talking about that line between observation and voyeurism.
Right.
And you had asked the question about, where does it actually begin?
Where does it end and where does voyeurism begin?
Yeah, and this article, The Gaze Unseen, actually spends some time on that as well.
Yeah, because it's not always bad to be curious about people, right? Like, the article acknowledges that we all observe other people to some degree, especially in public.
Exactly. It's part of how they're social,
Right.
how we navigate the world.
Exactly.
So it distinguishes between what it calls casual observation, which is generally fine.
Right.
And then voyeuristic observation, which crosses the line.
So like people watching at a park, that's totally fine.
Right.
But then the article brings up this example of like somebody taking pictures of someone else's feet in nylons, even if they're in public.
Yeah.
I'm still not quite clear on where that line is.
Well, it's a great question, and it really highlights the nuance of it.
Right.
So let's unpack it.
Yeah, okay.
So in public spaces, there's this understanding that we're visible.
Right.
However,
Right.
certain actions, like focusing on specific body parts,
Okay.
taking photos without consent, or like following someone persistently,
Right.
especially when those actions are intended to objectify or sexualize,
Okay.
that's when you cross the line.
So even if somebody's wearing, say, a short skirt in public, that doesn't mean that somebody can just stare at them or take pictures of them.
Absolutely not. Clothing is not consent.
Right.
And regardless of what anyone's wearing, they deserve to feel safe
Okay.
and respected.
That makes sense, but intent is tricky, right?
Yeah, intent is tough.
How do you know what someone's thinking?
You don't know what's in someone's head.
Right.
So that's why I think these conversations are so important.
Yeah.
Open, honest conversations about consent,
Boundaries.
being self-aware,
Absolutely.
and being open to feedback.
Yeah, and checking ourselves when we might be crossing the line.
Okay, so self-awareness, clear communication, respecting boundaries. These are all key.
Very important.
What about the role of technology in all of this?
Oh, gosh.
It seems like smartphones and social media have made it even easier to spy on people. Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, technology has both amplified the issue and made it even more complex.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the rise of things like hidden cameras,
Right.
stalkerware, which is this software you can install on someone's phone and track all their activity,
Yeah.
deepfakes.
It's scary.
It is scary.
So how do we protect ourselves and other people in this digital world?
Well, I think awareness is a good place to start.
Okay.
Knowing that these things exist can help us to be more vigilant
Right.
and to take steps to protect ourselves.
Perfect.
Being careful what we share online,
Yeah.
our privacy settings on social media.
Being aware of our surroundings.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good advice. But what about accountability?
Yeah.
I mean, taking a picture of somebody without their consent
right.
might seem like not a big deal, but it can have a huge impact.
It can.
Emotionally and psychologically on the person being photographed.
It can be very damaging.
So we need to hold people accountable.
Absolutely. And it's about taking these violations seriously.
Right.
Advocating for stronger laws to address all of this.
Even with technology.
Especially with technology.
Yeah.
And supporting victims.
Providing resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like a lot of this comes down to education and shifting societal norms.
Absolutely.
We need to be teaching people about consent and boundaries and respecting privacy.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
It's about fostering a culture where this isn't tolerated.
So it's not just about not being a voyeur.
Right.
It's about speaking up when we see it happening.
Exactly.
Calling it out when we encounter it.
Yes, because silence just perpetuates it.
Yeah, it's like we all have a responsibility
You do?
to create a safer
Yeah.
and more respectful world, both online and offline.
Very much so.
This has really made me think about my own behavior
Yeah.
and how much I've just taken for granted when it comes to privacy and consent.
It's something we should all be thinking about more.
Yeah.
It's an important conversation.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It really has.
One of the best.
I agree.
Okay, so before we wrap things up,
Okay.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about voyeurism being a symptom of deeper issues.
Right.
I think that's really insightful.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if by addressing those underlying issues like social isolation,
Yeah.
insecurity,
Right.
lack of healthy coping mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
could we actually prevent voyeuristic behavior in the first place?
It's a good question, and I think researchers are exploring that.
Yeah.
There is some evidence that suggests that by addressing those things,
Uh-huh.
it can help.
So it's not just about saying don't be a voyeur.
Right.
It's about creating a society that's supportive,
Exactly.
that promotes good mental health,
Yes.
that helps people develop healthy coping mechanisms.
It's about getting to the root of the problem,
Yeah.
not just addressing the symptom.
So it's about shifting from a culture that often enables voyeurism to one that prioritizes respect, empathy, and healthy connection.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From the psychology of voyeurism
Right.
to its ethical implications,
Absolutely.
the role of technology.
And how it all ties together.
Yeah, we started with talking about nylon ads and ended up talking about the future of technology.
Shows just how deep this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment and reflect on all of this, and then we'll wrap things up in the final part of our conversation.
Just watch me break it. You're sweet. You're falling into me, touch me.
So we're back for the final part of our deep dive into voyeurism. And I got to say, this has been a really, really fascinating conversation.
It has.
We've talked about the psychology, the ethical side, the role of technology.
Yeah, it's amazing how this one little topic kind of touches on so many different aspects of how we interact with each other.
Right.
And I think especially in today's world, with technology being what it is, it's so relevant.
So as we kind of wrap up this conversation, what really stood out to you? What are the things you really want our listeners to remember from all of this?
You know, I think one of the things that's so interesting about this topic is that it's often so hidden.
Yeah.
It disguises itself as something else, like curiosity, a need for connection, even entertainment.
Right. Like we were talking about before, someone who's struggling with feeling powerless might try to gain some sense of control
Exactly.
through voyeurism, or someone who's lonely might be looking for that connection in a really unhealthy way.
Right, and that's why it's so important to recognize that it's often a symptom of a much bigger issue.
Right.
And it's not just about condemning the behavior, but really understanding the context.
And the potential for harm. I mean,
Absolutely.
we talk about that.
It's huge.
The emotional distress, the violation, the potential trauma that can come from that.
Imagine that feeling of being watched,
Yeah.
reduced to an object
Yeah.
for someone else's gratification.
Not good.
No. It can really damage your sense of self, your ability to trust.
So knowing all this, what can we do? How do we create a world where people feel safe and respected?
I think education's got to be a big part of it. Having those open and honest conversations about consent, about boundaries, about how we use technology.
Yeah, and starting young.
Yes. Not just in schools, but at home,
Yeah.
in our communities,
In the media.
everywhere.
It's about creating this culture of awareness.
Exactly.
That people not only understand that it's wrong, but why it's wrong.
And give them the tools to recognize those behaviors and challenge them.
To speak up
Yes.
and to support the people who've been harmed.
Absolutely. It's about empathy,
Yeah.
understanding, respecting each other's dignity.
And that goes beyond just saying, don't do this.
It does.
It's about that deeper level
It is.
of respect.
Yeah.
But along with that education piece, we need accountability too, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like strong laws to address voyeurism, especially with technology,
Yeah.
and make sure that victims have support
Resources.
and access to justice.
100%.
Yeah.
It's about sending a message that this will not be tolerated.
So it's this combination of education
Right.
and accountability.
It makes you wonder about the future, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, technology is changing all the time.
Constantly.
And, the potential for this stuff is just going to keep growing.
How do we stay ahead of it?
That's a great question.
And I think we have to be proactive.
Yeah.
We can't wait for something bad to happen.
Right.
We have to talk about ethical tech development, build in privacy and security right from the start.
It's amazing to think that we started this conversation talking about nylon ads.
It is funny how these things connect.
And now we're here talking about the future of technology.
It just shows how this topic is woven into so many parts of our lives.
It really does.
It's important to keep talking about it,
It
to
is.
stay informed, and to really think about these things.
So for everybody listening, next time you find yourself wanting to peek behind that curtain,
Yeah.
take a second.
Think about the other person.
Think about the potential harm, the importance of respect and consent, and that value of genuine connection.
Maybe try looking for a real interaction instead.
I love that.
The world needs more of that.
It does.
Less voyeurism, more real connection.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing.
It has.
And to all of you listening, until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay respectful.
Just watch me break it. You're sweet.